Twins season is over, came to an end with a thud and barely a whimper. Twins 82-80 after a loss to the Orioles. We're going to get right on down to the bottom of it with our exit interview. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. And I've been watching the Twins for 3 decades, covering them for about half that long, covered them in person for a nice little spell there during the Paul Molitor and Rocco Baldelli eras. I guess the tail end of the Ron Gardenhire era as well. And, you know, we're gonna get down to what happened exactly this end of the season, all season, end of season. We're going to do autopsies the rest of the week. But for today, we're just going to do exit interviews. And of course, I'm joined by Mr. Dave Brown. You can follow him on the tweets at AnswerDaveBrown. Dave, you are coming to us from a lovely location that is not your basement.
No, New Orleans. I'm not sure. I don't remember who's got an affiliate down here. Is it the Brewers? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking like 2005, but no major league teams no Major League Baseball teams in New Orleans. So it was actually kind of nice to get away from the Twins and just look, just a little bit away from them for a while, not immersed in Twins. So
yeah, if I'm honest,
terrible way to end the season.
I had NFL obligations and the Vikings were on, and then I went to the Wild game. They had a preseason game against the Dallas Stars, or as you might like to know them, the Minnesota Wild of Christmas past. And so we talked, right? I didn't talk much or watch much of the Twins this weekend by design. I think a good decompression period was necessary for all included. We'll talk about, by the way, a decompression period for a very notable Twin who says he's going into the offseason not hurt, which is certainly a good deal. That also, for some reason, caused fans to go into a tizzy. So we'll break that down. Again, I'm Brandon.
That should be good news. That should be good news that this Twin is not rehabbing anything.
Well, should be.
It's not really taken that way necessarily.
Right.
But.
Well, thanks everyone for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, and of course, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. Love to hear from you in the comments. 5-star reviews are huge for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can leave a review. We love to see you. And by the way, today's show brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Seems weird, Dave, to not have to say, and you can catch the first pitch of every game on SiriusXM because there's no more games. And so the Twins season ended with a whimper and a thud. Deshaun Kiersey hits a homer, first of his big league career. Carlos Santana hits a homer, hopefully not the last of his big league career, but probably his last with the Twins. And Randy Dobnak gets the call back up. There's a lot of things we could talk about the game. I don't really want to. I want to talk about the Byron Buxton comments that Dan Hayes conveyed. It wasn't really a big deal. He said, so Dan said, heavy day around the Twins, but the best part was the exit interview with Byron Buxton. Buxton said, relaxation, a lot of relaxation, not a lot going in and out of physical therapy, just my normal off season. For me, it's the first in 6 years. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to enjoy it. First comment, not exactly what you want to hear from the leader in the clubhouse after a historic collapse. Second comment, as a fan base, I'm at a loss for words beyond belief, unfathomable. And knowing the guy that said that, he's not talking about the collapse, even though that's what Dan said. Another comment, that's the mindset Rocco has instilled, and so on and so forth. This fan base needed this season to end in the worst way, Dave. The toxicity has reached unparalleled levels. And again, it's justifiable that the team played like dog crap and fans are ticked. But like even the most innocuous thing, like Byron Buxton saying, oh man, I'm finally healthy. Everyone's like, what the hell, man? Why are you saying that? That's not okay. And it's like, what? It's like
this glass is not half full. It is all the way empty. people just, and it's funny how those comments, and they're just internet comments.
Yeah.
It's sort of the worst form of communication that we have today. But it's
Mm-hmm.
they're not. It's like the people are just sort of waiting for Dan to stop talking. It's one of those kind of conversations where you're not listening to the other person. You're just waiting for your. And I guess we all do that from time to time. It's kind of.
I don't recommend it in a marriage, by the way. I don't recommend it in a marriage.
No, you should do a lot of marriage. You should do a lot of listening in a marriage for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would help to be a good listener in as a Twins fan or a baseball fan in general. So it was very innocuous, not offhand so much, but it was it's never all. I mean, it's bad news how the Twins finished the season.
Yes,
but it's never all bad news or all good news about how a season goes or has gone. It should be taken. I don't know what the person's saying. That's not a good attitude or that's typical or whatever. It isn't typical because Byron Buxton has been hurt badly enough after seasons in recent years to need to devote lots of time to rehab in the offseason. This can just be a normal offseason rehab, which is amazing, on the heels of playing 100 games for the first time in however many years. That was a goal of his. And he played very well. I mean, we saw how Buxton played in center field and how it was when he wasn't out in center field. It was a big problem. Kind of like how Correa not being at shortstop was a big problem for the team.
Yeah.
And he hit very well. Slugged well over 800, 850 something, I think. So not slugged, but OPS. If he slugged 800, that would be truly amazing. But those are great. That is a great thing, and you need Byron Buxton obviously to be healthy going into the next season, and he's going to be healthier than he was a year ago, and that is a tent pole for this team, and it's a very good sign. I'm happy.
Well, so Byron Buxton in 102 games, 3.7 Fangraphs WAR. Carlos Correa in 86 games, 4.3. So your two best players combined for 8. Certainly not life-changing, but solid enough WAR. 3.1 for Castro, 3.0 for Santana. The bigger issue is the distribution of it. I mean, with Correa, it's concentrated into a small bunch of games where you got to cover the rest of the games with someone who's not as good. With Buxton, similar concept. With Castro, it just came down to the tale of two seasons for his halves. We'll have a full segment on that probably in Tuesday's show. And Carlos Santana, I mean, he just did about as well as you could expect a 38-year-old first baseman to do. So in general, though, I mean, they had enough guys have good seasons. It's just kind of how the season sequenced itself with guys being unhealthy and the offense crumbling all at once or all on cylinders at once. If you could split that up to where your offense plays at 3/4 speed instead of half speed or full speed for the course of a season, you probably have a better year. The data might come out the same, but the results look different. So anyway, let's see here. As far as the Buxton comments go, yeah, to me, pretty innocuous. I still lean back on having Paul Molitor on the previous podcast I hosted say, he's talked to Byron about it's not impossible for your 30s to be healthier than your 20s. It's not super likely for most people. That's just how aging curves and aging work in general. But who knows if this is the start of him having a relatively healthy decade of his 30s, whether it's 5-6 more years of playing or whatever it is. Again, I know I'm probably hoping against hope that that's the case, but this year was at least a stepping stone in the right direction.
For sure. And I think, I don't know if Byron's body type lends itself more to, being able to continue to be such a great athlete going forward. But the guy's, he's cut like a diamond and he's obviously still really fast. We saw several times this year where probably one of the only few good moments of the season as far as the last 6 weeks was Byron affecting a couple quick throws to first base when he was hustling and getting down the line and forcing errors or just beating the throw straight up and then forcing a wild throw from third base or shortstop, whatever it was. Game-changing plays that unfortunately it didn't all add up for the Twins as far as winning a bunch of games or whatever. But the guy obviously still has it. It's still in there. And a great athlete with a healthy body. Molitor's right. That's a guy who was a Hall of Fame talent in his 20s, but wasn't healthy enough to stay on the field in a bunch of different seasons. But in his 30s and early 40s, he was able to get out there and still be effective. And it's true. You can when you have a great base of talent and athleticism like Buxton does, I think there is some hope that he can play over 100 games in the next few seasons for the Twins at center field, and that would be huge.
19th in sprint speed among qualifiers this year as we had to break. Let's just go 2015 to 2024. These are his percentile ranks in sprint speed. 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, 99, 99, 93 in 2022, 94 in 2023, and 97 in 2024. That's the kind of upswing you cannot expect a guy who turned 30 to have unless he's starting to feel better. Now, let's do this. Let's take our first pause. When we come back, we've got some Joe Polad comments to unpack. We've got some interesting returns, guys who are guaranteed to return, and we'll see who maybe will or won't return. But again, first, a quick word. NFL fans, you can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, if you're watching the Vikings and they're up 28-0 and you think that maybe the tides are going to turn, head on over to FanDuel. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's like Red Zone on your phone, but in data form. You got to check it out. I highly recommend it. By the way, you can also get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. This NFL season, FanDuel is where you need to be. And again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Dave, the boss, whoever you want to, or whatever you want to call Joe Polad, said that in no uncertain terms, Derek Falvey will be back. Rocco Baldelli will be back. Personally, I thought it would have been wrong for those two guys to take any sort of fall for what happened here. Now, I say wrong in the sense that it wasn't entirely their faults. Certainly, there were things Derek Falvey probably could have done differently. There were things that Rocco Baldelli most certainly could have done differently. In the scope of baseball, that's always going to be the case in a game of failure, in a game of the ever-changing landscape. Now, that isn't to diminish the fact that this team's collapse is maybe their worst since the mid-'80s. So there is that. And I know that some heads will most likely roll. But Falvey and Rocco coming back, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, speaking of recent collapses, I wanted to turn it around and ask you a question. How much does the end of this season remind you of 2022? Does it at all? Similar circumstances? What's different about it?
I feel like this was more sudden. 2022 fell apart, I think, in Cleveland was like July. But I think if you were to look at kind of like the plot points of, like if you were to plot out the season and where things went wrong, you'd probably see a fair amount of overlap. This year felt different because I think at no time in 2022 did I feel like the Twins resembled the best team in the AL. And I think for a stretch this year, I thought that. I think that made this collapse worse. Now, when the collapse in 2022 happened because Tyler Thornburg and Jarrell Cotton were throwing big innings, kind of foreseeable. Like, teams can make that work. Tampa Bay seems to find two relievers every year that you're like, whoa, where'd that guy come from? And, right. It works. And you like to be that kind of team. So maybe that could have been Jarrell Cotton or Tyler Thornburg, who was coming back from the dead. With that said, 2024 hurts more because it was just so sudden. Like, it wasn't necessarily unforeseeable because they'd been hurt all year, but the drop-off was just a little more steep. So there's some common threads, but to me, 2024 is more disappointing.
I bring it up just in the context of, all right, now this is two situations where Rocco's had a team that was that appeared to be better than their final record happened, and they didn't have enough gas at the end. It's funny for all that we're talking about Buxton having more energy and more ability at the end of the season than he has in several years, 5 years, 6 years. But there must be. There's certainly something different to try if you're Rocco and staff to get the team in a better position or better tactics or strategies as far as they had relief pitchers who are good against left-handed batters, who are right-handed pitchers. And there was nothing that the front office did really to improve the left-handed pitching situation. Stop pitching them. Theo Barr had some moments, but they went with the other guys entirely too long, just because they were left-handed, it seemed to me.
Like Stephen Okert,
yeah. I think that sort of speaks poorly to how maybe the pitching staff was. That is one area where the pitching staff, I think, was mishandled. Just don't pitch the bad guys just because they're left-handed. It's not absolutely necessary, and it's not a situation like we had in baseball before, where you could bring in where you can protect the lefties and they could just face left-handed batters. They've got to, they're much more vulnerable because of the time they have to spend in the game. So I mean that's one thing. No matter what Falvey and Levine give you as far as personnel next year, just stick with the best guys.
Yeah, and Randy Choate's not walking through that door to get one out for you.
No. Oh boy, there's a name from the past. I wonder what Randy Choate's doing these days.
I think he was a Twin briefly, wasn't he?
Oh, yes. That definitely sounds right. I haven't looked it up, but even
Brian
if it wasn't,
Fuentes. We could do Brian Fuentes. He was
right.
He was a Twin for about a half hour.
So there's that, and there's Dan Hayes had another stat that as of really late in the season, the Twins were 7th worst in outs on the bases, and it was something that was happening a lot late in the season, more so than early in the season. I mean, if I'm looking at it objectively, that's coaching, that's preparation, that's it's poor execution on the part of the players, but it's also a poor understanding of what you guys have on the bases, and I think that's a thing that should be correctable and shouldn't have happened in the first place. I think there was that Carlos Santana getting doubled off. I mean, you can't teach a 38-year-old new tricks, but that play just couldn't happen, and that was like the extreme example of it. But I mean, that cost them a game. That's we can point to 3 or 4 of those base running examples where they messed up and they shouldn't have, and it cost them the game. And if that means they cost them the playoffs, they ended up missing the playoffs by 4 games. At the last week of the season, you could tell they were done. They were spent. Yep. But if they hadn't lost a few more games before that with poor base running, they would have been in it more, and they wouldn't have given up. And Buxton wasn't playing 2 out of the last 3 games, stuff like that. So I think that killed him. Not to get ahead on the autopsy, but anyway, Rocco and the guys, Tommy Watkins, need to do better as far as running the bases next year, or else if they have another small margin, they're going to be on the wrong side of it.
Yep. And by the way, we were thinking of Ron Mayhay, Aaron Fultz were the lefties. They did have Jesse Rocco for a minute, but the Twins did sign Randy Choate in 2007 and released him in spring training. That was the year I think they brought a bunch of lefties to camp, CJ Nitkowski, to see who would make it, and Dennis Reyes was one of their guys. So anyway,
CJ Nitkowski was just trying to be a broadcaster at that point anyway. So he was he's working on his next career.
Yeah, so that's how that goes. Well, let's take another break, and then when we come back, we'll wrap things up. I want to talk about and unpack the comments that Joe Polad made to Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic. Because I don't know. I read them, and I'm not really sure what to make of them, but it's pretty hard to be encouraged by them. So we'll talk about those here in just a split second. Got to get ready for games with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and find tickets to sports, games, concerts, you name it, they've got it. I went to a Wild game on Sunday night, and while we were sitting there, I got to thinking, I got these tickets for my brother who was in a suite, lucky him, but he had these tickets, and I thought, I wonder what it would cost if I took my neighbor with me and said, hey, if we do this again, what's it going to cost? So we looked it up. Gametime was perfect. I did the all-in pricing, so I toggled that option, and I saw that I could get into a preseason hockey game for as little as like $9 on the glass for $397. Now, I'm not paying $400 to sit on the glass at a preseason game, but if you want to do that, Gametime is the place to do it. Wild, though, heating up, getting going here. Timberwolves going to be kind of crazy with Karl Anthony Towns out of the picture. Certainly a shocker to see that news come through. And I'm going to be bitter if Woj's replacement is Jeff Passan. If Jeff Passan starts breaking basketball news, it's not going to be a good day. But Gametime is the app. We got to get back to business here, where you can get all your tickets. You again, my favorite, all-in pricing. You toggle that feature, tells you what you're gonna pay up front. None of those bait and switch fees at the back end. The seat views, you get a panoramic seat view, knowing what it's going to look like when you are going to be at the event. I did that for the game before we went on Sunday. And we were in section 203, right on center ice, but way up in the nosebleeds. Still, great view, and Gametime showed me exactly where I was going to be. And they also have the lowest price guarantee. If you see a ticket lower elsewhere in the same row, same section, they will give you not only the difference, but 110% of the difference, because you are covered not only by the best ticket plan out there, but by the most flexible customer service policy in the game today. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right.
I've used Gametime before. I had an issue that was my problem, that was my fault, and they helped me handle it really well. It was like a regular season game in Colorado a couple years ago or last year. So, we actually use these a lot of these sponsors, the services they have. It's kind of a nice thing to not have to hold your breath or hold your tongue when we're talking about associating something with this show that's
right.
Where we're also selling. We use the stuff too. Definitely use Gametime when you get a chance.
Highly, highly recommend. So Aaron Gleeman asked some, I don't know if I'd say pointed, but definitely pertinent questions of Joe Pohlad. And I just want to I may read them in full, but here we go. So Aaron said, you said you had to make business decisions, but does a sports franchise necessarily need to be treated as a typical business, or can it be treated as a part of a bigger community, and that you're stewards of something that involves thousands of people? As you look forward, is it going to continue to be treated as just revenue went down, payroll goes down, or is there a different view of a sports franchise? You own a lot of businesses. Is this one of them, or is this just potentially viewed differently? Now, Joe responded, no, I view my job as running our business on behalf of this team and our fans, and I'm trying to manage our business so that we can put out a winning team, both in the short and long term. And sometimes things come up, whether they are a number of different things. I'm not going to get into them. And then decisions need to be made. I'm not going to get into those types of decisions, but it's both long-term and short-term in terms of how you're describing it, Aaron. So yeah, the goal is always to have a winning product on the field where fans can come and get excited about their team. I read that as fast as I could. I hope it came out reasonably well.
I mostly understood you. You're good.
That to me was a non-answer.
Well, it certainly was vague, and there a little bit of double speak, and there's things that we have to imply, and things that it seems or infer, and things like it seems that he's implying. So good on Aaron to ask him and press him on the question, which is not. I mean, that should be like the easiest question that Joe Pohlad gets. You know, I don't know if it was the easiest or the hardest, but it wasn't even that hard of a question. And it seemed like as Aaron was pressing him in the conversations, the answers got shorter and shorter and shorter. He said at first, no, I'm not treating this like any other business. And then he kind of said, well, I'm sort of treating this like any other business because, we have to worry about winning now and we have to worry about winning tomorrow. And, that's why we're not going to add any good left-handed pitching to the roster during the season and leave Rocco and Pete Mackey with what we did. And, we're not going to be able to make up for our mistakes in the offseason with personnel because we have to worry about 3 years from now. So I think, that's how I inferred what he said. And I don't, later on, another reporter, probably Dan, or maybe it was multiple ones, said they're not going to lower payroll in 2025.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well,
Now, the good news is, as we said before, there is a malaise or a way of thinking in Major League Baseball now it's sort of a fight to get to the middle. We've got to be as mediocre as we can so we can kind of compete for the playoffs. But we're not going to overdo it. That's, again, not just a Twins thing. That's like most teams. So look at the White Sox. We're going to go 40 and 120, but we're not going to spend big on free agency because we have a lot of young players we want to see.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get to 55 wins. That's what our goal is. We're the White Sox. So in a different context, that's sort of what Joe Polad's saying about the Twins.
It reminded me of the Diversity Day sketch episode of The Office where it was diversity tomorrow because today is almost over. They're talking about winning tomorrow because today is almost over. And I don't know. And then so Aaron follows back again, doggedly determined to get an answer out of him, and we'll see if he does. Because of the performance on the field, but also the fan morale coming into the season, I'm sure your internal projections were, whatever your projections were for revenue, fell at least somewhat short. Does that become a cycle that if you lower payroll, fan morale, and performance on the field go down, at the end of the season you say, well, revenue went down, we need to lower payroll again, and it just repeats itself? Joe says, if we have a winning product, regardless of what our payroll is, I think fans will come out. That to me is an unsatisfying answer.
Oh, really? And it's very short, and it's not. I had a different point, and I'm not going to be able to make it. But it's it's a real short answer, and it goes back to we're not going to be able to fix it. Aaron's question is basically saying, doesn't it look like you're not trying to fix it when you are strident about not adding payroll, or don't change your mind about this or that because you're worried about the bottom line, and it looks like to fans like you don't care about this team enough. That's what he's saying, and it's true. And he didn't refute it. So
could have easily put it to bed by just saying something else.
Yes, I think, and it wasn't even like truth. It was like baloney, double speak. He could have been a little more straightforward with his answer.
A bologna sandwich with 2 slices, and we're about to add a third.
Like, I'd like to hear him say, well, we need to resolve, if this is really what the issue is, we need to resolve the local TV thing, the contract, where we have something that we know about for a few more years. Yeah. So we have that in our pocket. So we're not worried about being short or overspending. I would give us the reason. I'm not going to get into that. Well, this is the time to get into it. Address it a little bit. Maybe put some pressure on Major League Baseball or Valley Sports or the industry at large in general to resolve. They can't go into another season signing a 1-year deal with their TV. They need to fix their TV issue now so they know what they have, so they don't have that excuse. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they want to be vague.
There should be some urgency to fix that because it's still money in their pocket. But Gluman follows up last part of it here. Sure, but there is some relationship between revenue and record, and when you miss the playoffs by a few games, it's fairly straightforward to say, would X number of million help that? So as you look forward to next season, is it going to be similar in terms of resources given to the front office? And Joe Polad says, I'm not going to get into payroll right now, but we will have a better product on the field next year. Now, that starts out very unsatisfying, but then he finishes with, we're going to have a better product. Now, don't know what that means exactly. It's almost like you start with you want a cupcake, but you get cornbread, and then you put whipped cream on top of it. And it's like, this starts out not what I expected, and then you put something good on top of it, and it's like, I still don't really like this.
Lipstick on a pig kind of analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not ideal when when the owner responds with such vague replies on a question. It isn't that difficult. Are you going to try to make the team better or not? And he kind of answered that we're going to have a better product in the field, but that almost sounds like something that you just say to say it. How are you going to do that? Are you going to spend more money? Well, we're not talking about payroll, right? Are you going to settle your TV deal?
No, we'll see.
I don't have anything to say about that, so I'm not going to say anything. So
what
do you do here, Joe? What does Joe Polad do then?
Yeah, Dave.
I understand why fans are generally upset with the owners because of shows like that.
Yeah, I agree. And so lots to unpack. And the rest of the week, as you get back from New Orleans, we're going to do an autopsy. We're going to spend each segment dissecting an issue that led to this downward spiral where the postseason odds look like the steepest hill you've ever seen. Like Bemis Hill growing up for me. By the way, thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen today. For your second, find Locked On MLB. Get ready for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube wherever you listen to podcasts. Lots going on. Doubleheader today. Should be a whole lot of fun. Obviously not for the Twins, but that's okay. But for now, signing off from Minnesota here in New Orleans on his end, this is Brandon Warren saying thank you so much for Dave Brown, and we'll see ya
tomorrow.
Night.
Night. See ya. Alexei Casilla.